This was the Sweeney Todd chapter.
Yes. Between Vin and Orissa, they have a bit of a back and forth about flavors.
In addition to some wonderful cannibalism puns, although it's not cannibalism if it's a chondra, right?
Yep, it's just normal feeding.
We get Elend possibly at his very best.
And Vin grappling with what is it with Elend? So,
Do you think Vin is over her concern from the last chapter? Because I kind of got the sense when she comes to a very specific decision about Elend and Kelsier that she might be in a better emotional place than I might have left off the last chapter thinking.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's gone and it's over and done with. Listen, women, we hold on to things, okay? It's not, don't worry, that's not going to be done that easily. But she's having different feelings. She's having new, other insights. So, like, I think it was the intensity of the emotion previously in the previous chapter is not completely gone, but now she's got other things to consider, which is what Elend's making her feel now. And certain things that Elend actually, the way he words things in this chapter versus how badly he did in the last. So, yeah, I don't think it's over. She's not over it.
We've also got election season coming up.
Yeah. Good.
And Tindwyl is possibly trying to ostracize Sazed from the group. That's a strong way of saying it. I don't mean it quite as intense as that sounded.
Yeah, that does sound. I was like, whoa, okay.
We've got Tindwyl trying to keep Sazed not so much apart, but focused on what a good keeper should be focused on, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, that I can agree with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we?
I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to bring up. Yes, okay, I remember. We had predicted on several occasions, I think, or at least I had, that Elend would be successful in his meeting with Straff. I'm not sure that we ever defined quite what success meant or looked like. And obviously we did the blind for the last chapter, so I've had this week to sit and marinate. And I found myself asking, was he really successful? Because the more I thought about it, the more I came to think he just painted a massive target on Vin's back. And he damn near ordered an attack on the city. Of course he didn't, and he opted to send in Mistborn SEAL Team 6 to take out Vin. But I don't know if that's... I think the target makes Elend less successful than I had thought.
Yeah, shall we define shall we go to the defining of the success? Because I guess success might have, one way of defining it would be him surviving. So that's a good thing. There's one type of success there, but obviously if we have him as an ally, that's the ultimate success.
Yes.
Like that was the whole idea of going there. I don't feel like we were convinced that was going to happen.
No. So I think defined success would be Straff's agreement to attack set in conjunction with Elend, presumably so that Elend can hold back. And that wasn't quite, I think, where Straff left off. Now, Elend obviously doesn't know what Straff is going to do now, or rather, he thinks he knows what Straff is going to do now, which is to say comply. But obviously that's not happening, therefore, I don't think he was successful.
Yeah. The only way he was successful is that he got out.
Yes.
And it seems a bit silly for him not to realize that he's just put a target on Vin's back.
I agree.
And one thing that it's talking about marinating over since we did the blind, one of the things we did chat about, like the way that we would need to manipulate Straff would have to be with power and with physical means, that sort of thing. And manipulating him in terms of his feelings didn't actually occur to me, but that's actually what they landed up doing. Is they just landed up scaring him a little bit, and in that moment he did as they needed him to do. But that's one moment. He's there. They got out of a certain situation just by toying with his emotions for a little bit and knocking him off balance. But that's it. It's not. I don't think that would be a tactic to go with all. That would be how they should focus on it. So you have to have practical power against Straff. You can't bluff as much as as much as they did with emotions there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I feel like they played that card, and that card has only one window of effectiveness, because now they've triggered him.
Yeah,
he's
and the
even
thing
worse
is,
now.
Yeah, speak softly and carry a big stick is all well and good, but as Vin is the big stick here, you just gotta make sure that you don't drop it. And that actually speaks to the Elend and Tindwell conversation at the end of this chapter, which is to say, well, we'll get to it when we get to that stuff, yeah?
Yeah, but just a final thought on, with that stick metaphor. We had the stick being the other armies, and basically what that meeting did is Ellen was like, haha, but I've got this as well. I've got Vin. So now that's the thing that's changed. So that's the, and I'll put in air quotes, success that Ellen got is just by persuading him that Vin is enough, and that all that's done is just put a target on your back, and we don't have any notion of that, of any of either of them thinking about that, the implications of what just happened. But I guess I understand why, because Ellen's just been deposed.
Yes.
They got their mind on some things.
Yes, and speaking of that, I also wanted to comment. I had said leading up to this event, the being deposed, that I would have really, really liked one more assembly scene. And obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, we see why it was that Ellen had to be ignoring the assembly. So that Sanderson could maneuver us here to being deposed. I still would make the argument that one more assembly scene, maybe from Dockson's POV or something, would help elevate the book a bit. But I do understand what Brandon Sanderson was trying to accomplish. So I did want to say that. It would have,
if say we got a POV with Dockson, it would have just enhanced our concern, and then this would have been a payoff.
Yeah,
a lot more.
Yeah, especially because we knew it was building to something like that.
It just would have had a bit more emotion, because we would have more questions about it, like how it's happening and whatever. But I think that what he wanted was for us to not know about this law at all.
Agreed.
Until this point, so that we could really be shocked and also be irritated with Ellen a little bit.
Yes.
Like Tindwell inhabits that for us, where it's just like, why would you do this? But I guess we'll get into that discussion too.
Yeah. All right, I think it's time then. Shall we?
We shall.
Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. For this particular series, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, that darn Kitty.
Dorkus and I are both going into this story completely new, with almost no knowledge of the story or world.
Each segment, we intend to cover what happens in each new chapter, and wait. Kitty. You had me forget. You
I did.
begged me to do this one as the Lord Ruler.
Oh, come on.
Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. For this particular series, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Zatdan Kitter.
Dorkus and I are both going into this story completely new with almost no knowledge of the story or world.
Each segment, we intend to cover what happens in each new chapter and discuss our experience along the way.
Hold on to your butts because this is Ascension Unleashed, a blind read-through, and today we will be covering Chapter 28.
Chapter 28! Part 3. King. He left ruin in his wake, but it was forgotten. He created kingdoms and then destroyed them as he made the world anew.
Right, so that does tie into Elend making the world anew.
See,
what do you think?
The reason I just thought up the Lord Ruler for the intro was because I actually thought of Vin, and dare I say Sazad, and Marsh, creating kingdoms. When I first read this, I thought, gee, how long did any of these kingdoms last? But then it occurred to me, oh, he might have created several in different locations as a consequence of this or that. And then I thought, wait, a bunch of kingdoms were born when the Lord Ruler died.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah.
And the world was made anew when the Lord Ruler died.
Somewhat, yeah.
Now, it doesn't specifically say that this is a part of the prophecy. I think Quan here is just thinking on Elendi's brutality.
And just the consequence of him, of just his passage. What has occurred. But we are connecting it to the rest of the story, which is what we do with the epigraph. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, he created numerous kingdoms and then destroyed them.
Mm-hmm. But he did this in the service of creating the world, making the world anew. And then when we think of the actual Lord Ruler, also what happened with the deepness and whatever did make the world anew in a really bad way. We lost the colors we lost green plants. We had a red sun. Yeah. So yeah, that was also a way of making the world anew, and it went bad. But yeah, we've got as well, Elend is trying to make the world the way he wants it to be, his somewhat naive way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's holding on to that. So let me see if I understand this correctly.
Tindwyl said, calm and polite, yet somehow still stern and disapproving.
There is a clause in the kingdom's legal code that lets the assembly overthrow their king?
Elend wilted slightly. Yes.
And you wrote the law yourself?
Most of it.
You wrote into your own law a way that you could be deposed.
Tindwyl repeated. Their group, expanded from those who had met in the carriages to include Clubs, Tindwyl, and Captain Demew, sat in Elend's study. The group's size was such that they had run out of chairs, and Vin sat quietly at the side on a stack of Elend's books, having quickly changed to trousers and shirt. Tindwyl and Elend were standing, but the rest were seated. Breeze prim, Ham relaxed, and Spook trying to balance his chair as he leaned back on two legs. More Kelsiering from Spook.
Yes. And noticing there, Vin changing very quickly. Seems like we had the word quickly.
Yeah.
She changed. She's out of that dress again. Ooh, no. That for me just enhanced what she was feeling previously. It's like, oh, I guess I'm just the assassin. This can't be part of me.
Gotcha. I put in that clause intentionally, Elend said. He stood at the front of the room, leaning with one arm against the glass of his massive, stained glass window, looking up at its dark shards. This land wilted beneath the hand of an oppressive ruler for 1,000 years. During that time, philosophers and thinkers dreamed of a government where a bad ruler could be ousted without bloodshed. I took this throne through an unpredictable and unique series of events, and I didn't think it right to unilaterally impose my will, or the will of my descendants, upon the people. I wanted to start a government whose monarchs would be responsible to their subjects.
Sometimes he talks like those books he reads. Not like a normal man at all, but like words on a page.
Zane's words came back to her, seeming to whisper in her mind. You aren't like him. She pushed the thought out. So, again, we've got Elend's idealism, and he's got right ideas. It's interesting to consider. I think a lot of American values were born of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. There were very specific cultural and philosophical ideas that grew into this idea that all men are created equal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is not what has played out in Brandon Sanderson's world.
No.
So, culturally speaking, I think this makes Elend's ideas that much more radical. At the same time, I can understand that after having 1,000 years of one rule. The thing is, I wonder how many noblemen felt like they were oppressed. We had commented about them essentially living in gilded cages, but I wonder how many noblemen genuinely felt that they were living under a tyrant.
Yeah, I don't think it's that many of them. They were inconvenienced. That's why the cage was gilded. And they were fed very well, better than most people. So they definitely, they would be in a less inclined to rebel, even in thought, than the Scar.
Right. And so if they did not consider themselves necessarily as less than anyone, and yet they considered themselves above the Ska, it's hard for me to imagine most who aren't interested in philosophy to care to even contemplate a world in which everyone would be equal and the leaders are essentially beholden to the people.
Yeah, and the leaders are determined by their competence, not just, well, I guess they are still, if you in a monarchy, you're supposed because you are the chosen one, the one that has been able to hold the power, that kind of makes you the one that deserves it. But the illustration here of monarchy versus, I suppose, republicanism is demonstrated in this whole conversation, where he goes, the whims of my descendants. Like, that is exactly what a monarchy does. It's just like, oh, well, yeah, we're assuming that all of the relatives of this person are going to be the best person for us. And there is no two ways about it. He is the chosen one. That's what monarchy is about, like the blessed one, the one that is, I suppose, chosen by God and to lead everybody. And then whatever descendants you roll out, no matter how crazy they become, oh yeah, they stay the rightful king.
It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument that we have it play out in front of us, where most of the people are arguing for monarchy, and Elend is not for that.
Yes.
And also, just that's going into the character stuff. Vin is looking at, he's a philosopher, and he sounds like he's talking out of a book, And then now she's having the feeling of, she's not like him. You don't have to be exactly like the person you love. Good Lord.
That would be so boring.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that doesn't mean you can't admire the things that are different between you two as well. And she does change tone later on when she realizes, oh wait, that's actually good. It's a good thing that he sounds this way. Yes, he could be naive and whatever, but this is him. This is Elend. This is who you love. Then, with respect, Your Majesty, this has to be one of the most foolish things I've ever seen a leader do.
It was for the good of the kingdom.
It was sheer idiocy. A king doesn't subject himself to the whims of another ruling body. He is valuable to his people because he has an absolute authority.
Yeah, so Tindwyl is pissed. She is really angry right now.
But I get it, because she's like, are you for real? Who would write this into law? Well, somebody who's good to a fault. Okay.
Yeah.
And hey, that also lends back to that discussion where you were saying Ellen's ideas are radical, because she has not seen something like this in a leader in all her studies, basically. So he's crazy to her.
Yeah, and it does make me think what manner of leaders she has thought about in the past. Because, I mean, obviously most of history was destroyed, but, there were republics and democracies, Greece, Rome, and other kinds of governments. So I would like to know what kind of leaders Tindwyl has studied. I think she has said she's studied emperors, which are technically different than kings. Although, are they? But yes, they are. But are they? But kind of.
Yeah, well, or just have the history of pre-Lord Ruler times. What was that? What government has this world seen?
Yeah.
What attempts at governments have they seen? It doesn't have to be that it's all that. Maybe there's this one city that had a certain kind of leader or whatever. But it seems like her perception is skewed. He is quite radical.
Vin had rarely seen Elend so sorrowful, and she cringed a bit at the sadness in his eyes. However, a different piece of her was rebelliously happy. He wasn't king anymore. Now maybe people wouldn't work so hard to kill him. There was so much irony in that line right there. Maybe he could just be Elend again, and they could leave. Go somewhere. A place where things weren't so complicated.
Yeah, sorry, Vin. That's just
wishful thinking. In the sky.
Yeah, you think Ellen's being naive. People think Ellen's being naive. It's just a hope. You're allowed to have hopes and considerations.
Regardless, Dockson said to the quiet room, something must be done. Discussing the prudence of decisions already passed has little current relevance. Agreed, Ham said. So the assembly tried to kick you out. What are we going to do about it? We obviously can't let them have their way, Breeze said. Why, the people overthrew a government only last year. This is a bad habit to be getting into, I should think. We need to prepare a response, Your Majesty. Something decrying this deceitful maneuver performed while you were negotiating for the very safety of the city. Now that I look back, it's obvious they arranged this meeting so that you couldn't be present and defend yourself. That's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Dirty, sneaky. I think Elend handles it well, though, in a few moments.
Yeah, takes him a bit.
Elend nodded, still staring up at the dark glass. There's probably no need to call me Your Majesty anymore, Docs. I'm sure Tindwyl just had a minor heart attack.
Yeah, she's like, hey, guy, don't be... we worked hard on this. Nonsense.
Tindwyl said, arms folded as she stood beside a bookcase.
You are still king.
I've lost the mandate of the people. Yes, Club said, but you've still got the mandate of my armies. That makes you king no matter what the assembly says.
Exactly. Foolish laws aside, you're still in a position of power. We need to tighten martial law, restrict movement within the city, seize control of key points, and sequester the members of the assembly so that your enemies can't raise a resistance against you.
So I think that was one of the things we said at the end of the last chapter that he could do as an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things.
Yeah.
That I think that you brought up that option, but I don't know if we agreed that he would do that anyway. Yeah.
I don't remember specifically where we landed off the top of my head, other than to say I didn't think it was very Elend of him.
Yeah. It was just where we were discussing what you would do,
Yeah.
versus what Ellen wants to do.
Yeah. And again, Elend plays it well enough. Well, right. He does the good thing, and this chapter is very much Elend being the good man that he is.
Yeah, and he's being strong he's got everybody against him in this. He could easily lean into their influence, but he does not at all. He is so steadfast, and this is where his strength comes. And what a great start to the part called King. So this is him becoming a king.
Yeah. I'll have my men on the streets before light. No. There was a pause. Your Majesty, it really is the best move. We can't let this faction against you gain momentum. It's not a faction, Docs. It's the elected representatives of the Assembly. An assembly you formed, my dear man! They have the power because you gave it to them! The law gives them their power, Breeze, and we are all subject to it.
Nonsense! As king, you are the law. Once we secure the city, you can call the assembly and explain to its members that you need their support. Those who disagree can be held until the crisis is over.
Interesting, mine says ridiculous instead of nonsense.
Maybe they just didn't want, well, in yours, they didn't want to repeat, because she says nonsense before, and she says it again here. Either way, she's angry.
Yeah. No, Ellen said, more firm. We will do none of that. That's it then? You're giving up? I'm not giving up, Ham, Ellen said, finally turning to regard the group. But I'm not going to use the city's armies to pressure the assembly. You'll lose your throne! See reason, Ellen, Ham said with a nod. I will not be an exception to my own laws.
Don't be a fool. You should...
Tindwell, respond to my ideas as you wish, but do not call me a fool again. I will not be belittled because I express my opinion. Tindwell paused, mouth partially open. Then she pressed her lips together and took her seat. Vin felt a quiet surge of satisfaction.
You trained him, Tindwell,
she thought with a smile.
Can you really complain if he stands up to you?
Elend is standing firm. This is such a core value to him, and it's great to see.
Yeah, it's a non-negotiable for him. Like, throw whatever you want at him, and also when that happens, it makes him, it gives him a backbone, actually. So he's able to find a reserve to say, okay, Tindwell, you can stop being mean. He demands respect now because there is something, I suppose, worth fighting for, it seems like.
Elend is someone who I think cannot betray his own values, and that's what everyone is asking him to do right now. Yeah,
and that's where the buck stops. He's not going to fold with this, and that gives him a certain strength. I love it.
Elend walked forward, placing his hands on the table as he regarded the group. Yes, we will respond. Docs, you write a letter informing the Assembly of our disappointment and feelings of betrayal. Tell them of our success with Straff, and lay on the guilt as thickly as possible. The rest of us will begin planning. We'll get the throne back. As has been stated, I know the law. I wrote it. There are ways to deal with this. Those ways do not include sending our armies to secure the city. I will not be like the tyrants who would take Luthadel from us. I will not force the people to do my will, even if I know it is best for them. So I think responding with a guilt-ridden letter is a strong start to what he intends to do. And obviously, we as readers don't know that they have a little bit of time in which to maneuver, but I think with that hindsight of what they are going to do, I think starting with this letter is strong.
Yeah, it's the first step. That's it.
I also think, I assume whoever orchestrated this coup wasn't or may not have expected Elend to come back alive and successful, whatever that's worth. I suspect everyone in the Assembly will be uniquely surprised to find that Elend has come back and won't necessarily fight them on the deposition.
Yes, I think that they will expect Elend to react the way everyone here wants him to. It's just so they might have considered that possibility at least. Like they probably expected him to go and die from Straff, but then even so, if they were smart, they would consider the possibility he is successful somewhat and comes back. What would that look like? Oh no, now he's got the armies, so let's see how would we. They have a whole That's what they would be thinking about, but they don't have a plan for Ellen sticking to his principles.
Yeah.
Which helps, I think. I was wondering, are we having a sort of Ned Stark moment where it's like we're too invested in, doing what's right, and people don't, what's right won't prevail. It's worrying, but I still want him to try.
I don't think that is this moment. At least not yet.
Yeah. Your Majesty, there is nothing immoral about securing your power during a time of chaos. People react irrationally during such times. That is one of the reasons why they need strong leadership. They need you.
Wartime powers.
Yeah. Look, we ourselves have spoken about those use them. But we also seem like, I think we're both in support of Ellen doing what's right.
I agree. Well, now that he's not king.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe put in a clause that you can't depose or shouldn't depose when in a siege.
I don't know. I don't know how you could justify that, because that's then you're locked in to a certain king dealing with the siege if you don't believe they're dealing with it correctly.
Only if they want me, Tindwell.
Forgive me, Your Majesty, but that statement seems somewhat naive to me.
Ellen smiled. Perhaps it is. You can change my clothing and my bearing, but you can't change the soul of who I am. I'll do what I think is right, and that includes letting the Assembly depose me, if that is their choice. What a great line, but you can't change the soul of who I am.
Yeah, and she has just said, well, I think you're naive, and he's like, well, the soul of who I am, I suppose, can be called naive. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with doing what's right, which can be viewed as naive. I don't care. That's still me. So I really love that.
Tindwell frowned.
And if you can't get your throne back through lawful means?
Then I accept that fact, and do my best to help the kingdom anyway. And then I'm like, wow, that's... even after they deposed you.
You're like, oh, I must still help them. Yeah.
That's great. And clearly Vin agrees.
Yeah, it's something that Vin will... look, she does lament. So much for running away.
Vin thought, but she couldn't help smiling. Part of what she loved about Elend was his sincerity. His simple love for the people of Luthadel, his determination to do what was right for them, was what separated him from Kelsier. Even in martyrdom, Kelsier had displayed a hint of arrogance. He'd made certain that he would be remembered like few men who had ever lived. But Elend, to him, ruling the Central Dominance wasn't about fame or glory. For the first time, completely and honestly, she decided something. Elend was a far better king than Kelsier would ever have been. Okay, there is a lot to unpack there. First and foremost, we've got the first part of that. His simple love for the people of Luthadel, his determination to do what was right for them, really speaks to an issue that you had, Kitta, many times, whenever Elend would refer to the city as my city.
Yeah, I was worried about it. I didn't like the way that felt, but it's because he has good feelings towards it. It's his because he wants to take care of it.
Yeah. And Kelsier made certain that he would be remembered like few men who had ever lived. So, couple of things there. How much of an option did Kelsier have? He was fighting a god, essentially.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
And the plan worked. I mean, I kind of feel like, yes, he's arrogant and brash and narcissistic and loved to be loved. But, in a kinder and gentler world, I'm not convinced that he would have gone out of his way to make his legacy be that of a god's.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
It wasn't just because of Kelsier's ego. It was facilitated by it, very well done. But no, it wasn't just for him.
Yeah. Now, several chapisodes ago, we had asked what would have happened if Kelsier lived. And Someone had commented in the chat, I'm so sorry, I forget who it was, had said that they thought that Kelsier would live long enough to become the villain.
Mm,
And that I could believe. I could see him giving into some of his darker tendencies in an effort to stop Straff and Set. He probably would have marched right on into the camp and killed Straff. And we've had Vin have very specific thoughts about why Ellen's way is better. But again, I'm not sure I buy that Kelsier necessarily wanted to be remembered as a god, more that he felt like he had to stop the Lord Ruler or to fight back against the Lord Ruler and to inspire everyone else who did.
yeah, I'm sorry if that's naive of us to think, but that's what
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. And then the final part of this jam-packed set of paragraphs was, for the first time, completely and honestly, she decided something. Elend was a far better king than Kelsier would ever have been. I believe it.
Yeah,
That I agree with.
yeah, it's true. Literally, with just because of his principles, he has not been corrupted by the experiences that Kelsier had to go through. So it makes sense. Interesting that Vin is only consciously deciding this now, but I think it's a good time to decide that because he is shining through. He is reminding everybody why he actually should be the king. He should
Yeah.
be the leader. We should trust him. We should follow him.
Yeah.
When we were first meeting Ellen and could figure out that Vin was kind of infatuated with him, we did wonder: is this real? Does he really have proper care for Scar? And or is he just just playing with the ideas? But he really is as good as we were hoping, because that
Yeah.
was what we wanted for Vin. We wanted Vin to, because I remember we discussed like, oh, okay, he can help them, that whole thing. And at that point, I think we did have maybe a bit of a I don't know, worry, because we didn't know him. And this is exactly it. This is what Vin fell for, is the goodness.
Yeah. And given that she just saw Zane's scars and
Mm,
she was so messed up in the last chapter over that, her coming to this determination here and now is what makes me think that she is now in an emotionally better place. And it helps that Ellen has his conversation about her with Tyndall at the end, and that'll give
mm,
him some insight into how to deal with her. Although he, last chapter notwithstanding, has been dealing with her, I think, exceptionally well, regardless.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think she's, like I said, she's got additional feelings now. And this
Mm-hmm.
realization, absolutely, look, she hasn't had the thought yet of, hey, you had this thought about Zane, and now you've had this thought about Kelsier. She hasn't done the next step, which is realize that, wait, you don't want to be with Kelsier anyway. You shouldn't want to be with Kelsier. And a man like Kelsier. that whole
Mm-hmm.
idea. So those scars should not matter in the way that they did initially. She's going through an emotional process. I'm loving it. The character work in this book, I enjoy it so much. I really do.
Yeah. I'm not certain what I think of this experience, mistress, a voice whispered beside her. Vin paused, looking down as she realized that she had begun idly scratching Orasaur's ears.
I laughed out loud reading this. Like there was what's going on from the household basically, but I didn't see it coming, and then I just the way that he Orisa said, I'm not sure about this experience. It was so comedic. Oh, it's gold.
She pulled her hand back with a start.
Sorry.
Orasaur shrugged, resting his head back on his paws. So you said there's a legal way to get the throne back? How do we go about it? The assembly has 1 month to choose a new king. Nothing in the law says that the new king can't be the same as the old one, and if they can't come up with a majority decision by that deadline, the throne reverts to me for a minimum of 1 year. So, what exactly constitutes a majority opinion? 51 to 49? Or like 33, 33, 34?
We need the specifics of that eventually to know what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do know that there are two like leader guys that would want to take over.
Yeah.
From the two possible things that are vying for power in there. Forget their names, but see, maybe we should have had another scene with them so we could remember them. But
Yeah.
that helps because then they're busy floundering on that issue, so it helps thin out this need of a majority for whoever's going to come in next.
Yeah. Complicated, Ham said, rubbing his chin. What did you expect? Breeze said. It's the law. I didn't mean the law itself. I meant getting the assembly to either choose Elend or not choose anyone. They wouldn't have deposed him in the first place unless they had another person in mind for the throne. Not necessarily. Perhaps they simply meant this as a warning. That seems a bit optimistic, I think.
Yeah. Like, good considering it, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm assuming one of the merchants or one of the noblemen already has everyone else, or most everyone else, bought and paid for. And it could just be Game of Thrones right now. Again, we don't know, because we don't know the disposition of the assembly and the factions they're in. And that is really why I would have loved one more chapter.
Maybe it's, but I do understand the idea of us not knowing being the objective, us being confused and not knowing what's actually going on in there. That mystery being something that he wanted to create.
Yeah. And I'm sure we're going to get more of that as election season ramps up. Yes, I am going to make that joke twice in an episode.
And I will laugh again.
Not necessarily. Perhaps they simply meant this as a warning. Perhaps. Gentlemen, I think this is a sign. I've been ignoring the assembly. We thought that they were taken care of since I got them to sign that proposal giving me right of parley. We never realized that an easy way for them to get around that proposal was to choose a new king, then have him do as they wished. He sighed, shaking his head. I have to admit, I've never been very good at handling the assembly. They don't see me as a king, but as a colleague, and because of that they can easily envision themselves taking my place. I'll bet one of the assemblymen has convinced the others to put him on the throne instead. So we just make him disappear. I'm sure Vin could... Elend frowned. I'm joking, El, Ham said.
We're back to El.
Yes, we're back to El, but also a poorly... That's a cringe humor. Spook's joke, the other chapter, was much funnier.
Yeah, I don't think he was actually joking. I'm sure Vin could. And you know what? I'm glad that we had Elend frowned, because Vin needs that. Vin needs Elend not going, oh yeah, let's just maneuver. Let's aim Vin at someone. Yeah.
Yeah, she needs to hear that Elend does not like the idea of just loosing Vin on their enemies.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yes, he values her, and that is a bit scary. And yeah, the way he reacted in the previous chapter, the way he was speaking about it, I understand it was just the emotions that he was feeling at that point. So, but that made Vin more sensitive. And I would hope that her seeing Elend frowning is just a little notice, a little thing that, hey, listen, he doesn't think of you the way you're thinking of yourself.
Yeah. You know, Ham, the only funny thing about your jokes is how often they lack any humor whatsoever. You're only saying that because my jokes are mostly about you. Breeze rolled his eyes. You know, Orasor muttered quietly, obviously counting on her tin to let Vin hear him. And I'm so glad that's there, but I have comments. You know, it seems that these meetings would be more productive if someone forgot to invite those two. Vin smiled.
They're not that bad,
she whispered. Orasor looked at her.
Oh no, for me, we've got Orasor raised an eyebrow. I love that. That's better.
Orasor raised an eyebrow.
Okay, they do distract us a little bit.
I could always eat one of them if you wish, That might speed things up. Vin raised an eyebrow.
Okay, so I got Vin paused.
Vin paused. Orosur had a strange little smile on his lips. Condra humor, mistress. I apologize. We can be a bit grim. Vin smiled.
They probably wouldn't taste very good. Ham's far too stringy, and you don't want to know the kinds of things that Bree spends his time eating.
I'm not sure. One is, after all, named Ham. As for the other, he nodded to the cup of wine in Breeze's hand. He does seem quite fond of marinating himself.
Laughed out loud at all of that.
Dark.
Reading the
I
book.
loved it. I love that Vin goes along with it.
Yes, that she's like, wait, we're joking? Okay, cool. And she has a bit of a grim sense of humor too. So look at her go.
It's really, really important to remember, though, that there is one other person in that room capable of burning tin.
Yes, Tindwyl.
No?
Well, not. Sorry. I'm just.
Tindwyl.
No, I'm just thinking of her. She's able to use a tin mind to listen properly. But you're talking about Spook.
Yes, I'm talking about Spook.
Sorry, I was thinking of Tindwyl being able to listen in. But you're right, burning tin, actually. It would be him. So what's important about that? That Spook now knows that Orosur is Orosur. Yeah.
And he notices things.
Yeah, and
Now,
he would notice her lips moving.
Well, he would hear as well, because it does all the senses.
Yeah, I know it does all the senses, but he would notice that and then focus in on her, is what I'm saying. Even if he was distracted by what's going on with the rest of the conversation, he would, why are her lips moving? And I can't hear her. So the focus, because remember, his whole thing is tuning out the right things.
Yeah. Now, we know that he's not the Condra, so at least there's that, but she's being very talkative in front of the group.
Yeah, but you know what? Eventually, we're going to have to find out who the Condra is, and which is, she's talking to him anyway. But she would be worried herself, should be worried that they know this. I don't know if this is setting it up for later, or if it's just an interesting thing we've noticed. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be paid off later. Yeah.
Elend was picking through his stack of books, pulling out several relevant volumes on law, including the Book of Luthadel Law that he himself had written.
Your Majesty,
Tindwyl said, emphasizing the term.
You have 2 armies on your doorstep, and a group of Kolos making their way into the central dominance. Do you honestly think that you have time for a protracted legal battle now?
Elend set down the books and pulled his chair to the table. Tindwyl, I have 2 armies on my doorstep, Kolos coming to pressure them, and I myself am the main obstacle keeping the leaders of this city from handing the kingdom over to one of the invaders. Do you honestly think that it's a coincidence that I get deposed now? Several members of the crew perked up at this, and Vin cocked her head. You think one of the invaders might be behind this? Ham asked, rubbing his chin. What would you do if you were them? Elend said, opening a book. You can't attack the city because it will cost you too many troops. The siege has already lasted weeks, your troops are getting cold, and the men Doxon hired have been attacking your canal barges, threatening your food supply. On top of that, you know that a large force of Kolos are marching this way. And, well, it makes sense. If Straff's and Set's spies are any good, they'll know that the Assembly nearly capitulated and gave the city away when that army first arrived. Assassins have failed to kill me, but if there were another way to remove me... Yes, this does sound like something Set would do. Turn the Assembly against you, put a sympathizer on the throne, then get him to open the gates. So, can we presume that Straff was aware of this as well?
Maybe. I don't think it's necessary that he also knew about this. He might have considered it, but it's not really his style himself. Maybe he would have considered, okay, Set would have done this. I don't think it matters.
Agreed. It does not matter. I was just thinking about it because clearly the two of them were talking.
But yeah, I think it's mostly Set's maneuver because Straff does not care about Elend, doesn't consider Elend enough of a threat to to have to put so much effort into removing him in that way.
And Elend is about to comment on this exact question that I have posed. Elend nodded, and my father seemed hesitant to side with me this evening, as if he felt he had some other way to get the city. I can't be certain either monarch is behind this move, Tindwyl, but we clearly can't ignore the possibility. This isn't a distraction. This is very much part of the same siege tactics we've been fighting since those armies arrived. If I can put myself back on the throne, then Straff and Set will know that I'm the only one they can work with, and that will hopefully make them more likely to side with me in desperation, particularly as those Kolos draw near. That's very optimistic, and not incorrect. It's just, can you do it?
Yeah, the can you do it part still up in the air, but the idea that it's not just a distraction, it's not just a side quest. This is part of the main problem here. It's part of the main siege dynamic. I think that's important for everybody to understand.
Yep. With that, Elend began rifling through a stack of books. His depression seemed to be abating in face of this new academic problem. There might be a few other clauses of relevance in the law. I need to do some studying. Spook, did you invite Sazed to this meeting? Spook shrugged. I couldn't get him to wake up.
He is recovering from his trip here,
Tindwyl said, turning away from her study of Elend and his books.
It's an issue of the Keeper's.
Needs to refill one of his metal mines? Tindwyl's expression darkened.
He explains that to you, then?
Ham and Breeze nodded. Well, I mean, in part on Kelsier's orders because of the logbook, and I assume she knows about the logbook, but she probably doesn't know that Kelsier had the entire crew read the thing, so... But yes, I understand her reaction.
Yeah, she would just... You're just supposed to make it mysterious, even logbook aside. It's just supposed to be, he's a keeper, he can do the thing. They don't know how it is. You shouldn't have the word metal mind in your vocabulary.
Yeah. Ham and Breeze nodded.
I see. Regardless, he could not help with this problem, Your Majesty. I give you some small aid in the area of government because it is my duty to train leaders in knowledge of the past. However, traveling keepers such as Sazed do not need to take sides in political matters.
Political matters? Breeze asked lightly. You mean like overthrowing the final empire?
That was a great line. I was like, yes, exactly. Sorry, Tindwyl. He bloody well overthrew. He was on the top of the tower overthrowing the Lord Ruler, okay? He's taking sides.
Yes, and I am so glad that other people are saying what Sazed said to her the last time we saw them together. And I love that it's coming from Breeze after Tindwyl had some very nice things to say about him.
Yeah, that works as well. Absolutely, it's meaningful.
Tindwyl closed her mouth, lips growing thin.
You should not encourage him to break his vows,
she finally said.
If you were his friends, you would see that to be true, I think.
Oh? Breeze asked, pointing at her with his cup of wine. Personally, I think you're embarrassed that he disobeyed you all, then actually ended up freeing your people. Tindwyl gave Breeze a flat stare, her eyes narrow, her posture stiff. They sat that way for a long moment. Oh, so tense.
Push on my emotions all you wish, Soother. My feelings are my own. You will have no success here.
Breeze finally turned back to his drink, muttering something about, damn terracemen. Elend wasn't paying attention to the argument. He already had 4 books open on the table before him and was flipping through a 5th. Finn smiled, remembering the days not so long ago when his courtship of her had often involved him plopping himself down in a nearby chair and opening a book.
He is the same man. And that soul, that man, is the one who loved me before he knew I was misborn. He loved me even after he discovered I was a thief, and thought I was trying to rob him. I need to remember that. Yes, you do, Vin!
Yeah, and that's what makes me think she has turned a corner.
Yes, it's a good, that she has turned some sort of corner. It's good for her to stay with that. And remember, he did love you before he knew you were misborn.
Did your version say, and that soul, that man? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, mine does not say "and that soul." It just says "and that man." And I'm kind of bummed because I love that she thinks that.
Mm. Yeah, especially after he himself said you can't change the soul of this man. Basically, then you can't change you can change the clothes, but you can't change the soul of a man.
Yeah.
So she is now remembering the soul of Ellen, and hey, that soul cared about you before you were a tool, the way that Zane wants you to think. So
Yeah.
hold on to that, Vin. Hold on to it when Zane tries his bullshit again. Come on.
She whispered to Orosor, standing as Breeze and Ham got into another argument. She needed time to think, and the mists were still fresh.
That scared me. She's going out.
Oh, yeah.
She's
With a
about
hit
to
squad
be.
coming.
Yeah, the hit squad's on the loose. So, oh, yeah.
The last thing Ellen needs right now is for Vin to be injured.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh. This would be a lot easier if I weren't so skilled, Ellen thought with amusement, poking through his books. I set up the law too well. He followed a particular passage with his finger, rereading it as the crew slowly trailed away. He couldn't remember whether he'd dismissed them. Tindwell would probably chastise him for that. Here, he thought, tapping the page, I might have grounds to argue for a revote if any of the members of the Assembly arrived late to the meeting or made their votes in absentia. The vote to depose had to be unanimous, save, of course, for the king being deposed. So, that's good to know. I like that.
Yeah. So that means that they did have a unanimous vote to depose, but that's not the same thing as having a unanimous vote for another leader. It's just that they all wanted Ellen out.
Yeah. He paused, noticing movement. Tindwell was the only one still in the room with him. Resigned, he looked up from his books. I probably have this coming.
I apologize for treating you with disrespect, Your Majesty.
Ellen frowned. Wasn't expecting that. You know, he thinks that phrase quite a bit.
Wasn't expecting that. Yeah. He's noting. It's just he just notes those things. Okay, that's not what I was expecting. I have a habit of treating people like children. It is not something that I should be proud of, I think.
Ellen paused. Tindwell had taught him never to excuse people's failings. He could accept people with failings, even forgive them, but if he glossed over the problems, then they would never change. I accept your apology.
You've learned quickly, Your Majesty.
I haven't had much choice, Ellen said, smiling. Of course, I didn't change fast enough for the Assembly.
How did you let this happen? Even considering our disagreement over how government should be run, I should think that these assemblymen would be supporters of yours. You give them their power.
I ignored them, Tindwell. Powerful men, friends or not, never like being ignored. She nodded.
So perhaps we should pause to take note of your successes rather than simply focusing on your failings. Vin tells me that your meeting with your father went well.
Ellen smiled. We scared him into submission. It felt very good to do something like that to Straff. Unfortunately, I think I might have offended Vin. Tindwell raised an eyebrow. Ellen set down his book and leaned forward with his arms on the desk. She was in an odd mood on the way back. I could barely get her to talk to me. I'm not sure what it was.
Perhaps she was just tired.
I'm not convinced that Vin gets tired. She's always moving, always doing something. Sometimes I worry that she thinks I'm lazy. Maybe that's why. He trailed off, then shook his head.
She doesn't think that you are lazy, Your Majesty. She refused to marry you because she doesn't think that she is worthy of you.
I'm so glad that Tindwell is enlightening Ellen on some of
Yes.
Vin's issues.
Yes, exactly. He needs to understand where she's coming from. And I love that he is so oblivious. He actually disagrees.
Yeah. And I like the way that she words it as well. It's she's very good at explaining the issues to Ellen.
Yeah.
But yes, as you say, he disagrees. Nonsense. Vin's mistborn, Tindwell. She knows she's worth 10 men like me.
You understand very little about women, Ellen Wensher, especially young women. To them, their competence has a surprisingly small amount to do with how they feel about themselves. Vin is insecure. She doesn't believe that she deserves to be with you. It is less than she doesn't think she deserves you personally, and more that she isn't convinced that she deserves to be happy at all. She has led a very confusing, difficult life.
Summed up to a T and oh so sad.
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's exactly it. Vin doesn't think she deserves to be happy at all. And it's
Yeah.
not that she would say, I don't deserve to be happy. She doesn't have that insight into herself. She doesn't know that that's what's underlying all of it. She would more go, do I deserve to be happy? It's already a question.
Yeah. Also, slight difference in additions.
Hmm.
Mine is, to them, how they feel about themselves has a surprisingly small amount to do with their competence.
Oh, it's just the other way around.
Yeah.
Hmm. I like your that way. It makes
I do
it
too.
yeah, that seems to make more sense to me as a
Sounds more
woman.
natural.
Yeah, but as a woman, it's I don't know. It seems like competence isn't negligible. Okay, it's not, but that's a different issue. I don't know. Just somehow the sentence structure, having it the other way around, makes that nuance come through to me.
How sure are you about this?
I've raised a number of daughters, Your Majesty. I understand the things of which I speak.
And then immediately we get an answer to that question that I think I had asked a while back now
Mm-hmm.
regarding the breeding program and what role
Yeah.
she played in that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't
dear.
think you would. Yeah, I don't think you would have a female terrorist woman that isn't part of it, I suppose.
Depends how many the Lord Ruler wanted.
Mm.
Evil stuff. Disavow. Daughters? You have children?
Of course.
The terracemen he'd known were eunuchs, like Sazad. The same couldn't be true for a woman like Tindwell, of course, but he'd assumed that the Lord Ruler's breeding programs would have affected her somehow.
Well, they did.
Yes.
Hello, they did, clearly. The fact that that doesn't mean that it would be the other way around, that being affected doesn't mean you would not breed. It could mean that you were bred, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, you must make some decisions, Your Majesty. Your relationship with Vin is going to be difficult. She has certain issues that will provide more problems than you would find in a more conventional woman.
We've already discussed this. I'm not looking for a more conventional woman. I love Vin.
I'm not implying that you shouldn't. I'm simply giving you instruction, as I've been asked to do. You need to decide how much you're going to let her go and your relationship with her distract you.
What makes you think I'm distracted?
I asked you about your success with Lord Venture this evening, and all you wanted to talk about was how Vin felt during the ride home.
Elend hesitated.
Which is more important to you, Your Majesty? The girl's love or the good of your people?
I'm not going to answer a question like that.
Eventually, you may not have the choice. It is a question most kings face, eventually, I fear.
No. There's no reason that I can't both love Vin and protect my people. I've studied too many hypothetical dilemmas to be caught in a trap like that. Tindwell shrugged, standing.
Believe as you wish, Your Majesty. However, I already see a dilemma, and I find it not at all hypothetical.
She bowed her head in slight deference, then withdrew from the room, leaving him with his books. Okay, but look, if Vin's gonna be your WMD, she needs to be in a good headspace for it.
Okay, but oh, hello, what about the headspace we're talking about here is Elend. Oh, okay, I suppose you're saying she needs to be in the relationship with him, so it doesn't matter. She has to. It's too late now.
I'm saying a happy Vin is necessary for the good of the kingdom. The two are one and the same, and Elend can make Vin happy. So,
yes,
Elend being concerned about Vin's well-being is good for the kingdom. No, I get where Tindwell is coming from. I do, but at the same time, I don't think Elend was out of line here.
No, he's not out of line. Tindwell is more about no. Eventually, you might have to choose between the two. So he's like, well, listen, I'm not going to get down to that. I'm not going to get into that situation at all. But she's like, there is already a dilemma here because, yeah, it may come down to it whether he has to win. If he has to choose between the love of his life and the good of the people, it's going to be a difficult one. And it's going to be tough on him and maybe tough on Vin. If Vin's just, imagine if Vin's life is in the balance, I don't think Vin would see betrayal in it. She would understand. It's for the good of the people.
Do you think Ellen is going to have to make this decision in this book?
I don't think so, but I think it'll be something that we can note going forward, like some tension between the two things going forward. I don't know if we're going to get to that yet. Maybe. Would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Watch the next chapter. Boom, it's done.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, not a bad chapter.
I loved it. Loved it. Funny, intriguing, lots of good character work. Yeah. All in all,
Every
a good
single
one.
ska on the assembly should be backing Ellen.
Right? They really should, but I don't know. There are some very selfish merchant people, self-serving. So if they can be convinced that that a certain going with a certain nobleman is better for them financially, fine. But yeah, that seems like a weak argument to me.
I don't think it would be financially a good decision for any ska to side with noblemen, because both Set and Straff will turn them right back into slaves. Ellen seems to be the only one who doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, that their only hope lies there. They would be naive to believe whatever the noblemen in the assembly are saying to them.
Yeah. And
Right.
it's only been, what was it, 1 year since overthrowing the Lord Ruler? All of the ska should damn well remember what it was like under the nobleman and the Lord Ruler.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, talk about 3 or 4 generations from now, and we'll see how many ska are willing to try and make a few bucks at their own expense. But 1 year after, I think there should still be a lot
fresh.
of, fresh feelings.
And look, we were worried about Ellen being the king because he was a nobleman. We were worried about him being acceptable to them. He is now proving he is the best thing for them by doing what is right. So we want them to notice that, obviously.
Yes. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Subscribe to that Don Kitte if you get a chance, because she's got a pretty darn good channel. And she's also doing games on a secondary channel now as well. And hopefully by the time this airs, so will I. So check those out. And we'll see you next time. Good days, bye.